team in the SEC Conference. We're going to build the best football program in the SEC Conference.
You have now arrived at Stadium and Gale.
The kick, it's been blocked again! How about it? It's been blocked again! It's going to heat one deep down the field. It's going to be to the goal line. It's going to be gone! It's a touchdown! And the Gators have won the game! Tyree Cleveland! How about it? I can't believe what I just saw! Dropping back to throw. Pops and fires the ball over the middle. It's Norrie! It's Norrie! Got a touchdown! Norrie's got a touchdown! Oh, man! Norrie's got a touchdown! Ahmad Black, in his final game as a Gator, takes it all the way home and sends Urban out the winner.
You have now arrived at Stadium and Gale.
Boys and girls, ladies and gents, welcome to another episode of Stadium and Gale. And it's not Silk, it is Dan
and Delatorre. Silk gallivanting off in the Appalachian Mountains. Too much moonshine.
Yeah.
Too much moonshine, too little Wi-Fi.
Yeah, Dan's old Wi-Fi made it up to Boone, North Carolina. Yeah, I sent him the router. Said, "Hey, this will work." But no, Silk's on vacation. He's on a family trip up to North Carolina. Saw him doing wind sprints against his son yesterday, uphill. Did you see that, Nick?
Uphill wind sprints. Getting close. He's got maybe 3 to 4 more races left.
Yeah.
Harlem's got him in his crosshairs, really.
Yeah. I was gonna say this time next year, I like Harlem by 5 or 6 strides. But for now,
I don't, because Silk is a wily veteran. He will win one more race, and then he will not race his son anymore.
Yeah, he'll go out on top. Yeah. He'll say, "Hey, I'm ready to hang up the cleats, retire on top." A little Barry Sanders action.
Yeah,
I can see it. But it is just Nick and I today. We are going to do obviously a full comprehensive coverage of SEC Media Days. But if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. Please leave a comment. Let us know where you're listening from. Let us know what player you're most excited about this year. Do whatever. Just drop it in the comments there. Also, quick programming note. If you are listening to us on Apple Podcasts because we shared it on, I was going to say Twitter, but apparently X now because we shared it on X. You will have to resubscribe to the feed. We had some issues with a former bad actor that was associated with the podcast. The feed got deleted on the old one, so it will no longer update with the way that our platform works. So you will have to resubscribe. While you're there, please just give us a 5-star review. Please give us a quick comment. It helps us. That's the biggest thing that we lost. All of the old episodes are still there. All of the old episodes are on the new feed. But the biggest thing we lost was about 1,200 ratings. So if you could go ahead and like and subscribe there and leave us a comment. But Nick, how was your weekend, my friend?
Weekend was good. Got to see some friends. They had their 7th wedding anniversary, so hung out with them and just getting geared up. It's media day is this week. The team will start practicing a week from today. We've made it through the barren wasteland of the off season. It doesn't seem like I got much of an off season because baseball went so far and then got married and then was out of the country, came back, and here we are. Football season's back.
Yeah, football season is back. SEC Media Days in beautiful Nashville. I know that you were upset that you couldn't make it back to the best SEC city in the world this past weekend. I was down in the 954. It was my little nephew's 4th birthday, so got to go to the pool with him. Man, corralling 4-year-olds a lot harder than I imagined. Not something that, I have a ton of experience with. Obviously, no kids myself, but corralling 4-year-olds, trying to keep them entertained. They like to throw punches. They like to jump at you. They like to run and Oklahoma drill you. So, it was, came back a little battered and bruised, but
they have a low base as is. So
they do. Yeah.
You say in the Oklahoma drill, low man wins. What is the stance to get lower than a 4-year-old to not get run over and be on the low light reel?
You can't. And
barbecue.
they can't, You know, they have zero thought about it, whether they're going to hurt themselves. And if they do, they just cry until they get coddled, right? But they have zero fear. They'll just go and they'll throw punches. You know, there was my other nephew turns 6 in a couple of months, and he had a friend there, and they were just throwing punches at my dad's stomach. And after a while, it's like, all right, buddy, now it's time to, we're going to meet up at the OK Corral and square up here. But no, it was a great time, great weather. I want to give a quick shout out. Ran into an old high school or a college friend of mine, Harold Pryor. He's actually the state attorney for Broward County, but ran into him. Haven't seen him in a long time. He listens to the pod, so shout out to Harold. Great seeing him. Nick, a little inside story from your wedding. Your best man told a story about Runions in a square up that you almost had at Runions years ago. Didn't end up happening because you ended up at a Taco Bell, but almost went there for dinner Friday. Tried to get in, but they said no cigar. So almost went back to your old stomping grounds.
You thought you had Walkup Runions pull.
I don't. That's what I learned.
Back in the day when you lived in the 954, perhaps. But glad that you were just trying to do it by yourself and you didn't have Brooke with you. That's tough to come back from. Hey, babe, I got us for dinner. Don't worry. Oh no, that place is tough to get into. I know a guy. And then
you Springs legend.
Get to the door and it turns out you don't know a guy.
Yeah, don't know a guy.
And then you end up at Taco Bell.
Yeah, no, ended up at Big Bear Brewing, which is a good spot. Met up with the best man that was in my wedding. Great guy. I haven't seen him in about a year, but man, going back to 954, it's crazy. I went down to Fort Lauderdale Saturday night, went down to the Sea Strunk Market, which is like a food hall. But the amount of construction that's happening in Fort Lauderdale, the amount of just big bread that's down there, it was cool to be back, but it's great to be back in Tampa. So let's get started, Nick. As always, let's give a shout out to our presenting sponsor, Alan Horn with State Farm Insurance. Visit him at Alan Horn Insurance. That's ALANHORNE insurance.com. Always a good time to look at your rates for insurance. I just saved $600, I think, re-upping my insurance policy with a different carrier. So always check out your insurance policies. Again, Alan Horn, 706-692-2888 or AlanHornInsurance.com. That's automobile insurance, boat insurance, RV insurance, business insurance, life insurance, renters insurance, and home insurance. So again, Alan Horn with Alan Horn Insurance in Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama. Nick, SEC Media Days came and went from beautiful Nashville, Tennessee. Billy Napier spoke on Wednesday, but give us a high-level overview. Second time there, first time in Nashville for SEC Media Days, but talk to us a little bit about what your thoughts are on Billy Napier.
Yeah, I thought last year Billy's kind of more just taking it in. His first one, getting asked a bunch of questions that maybe he didn't know the answer to or didn't have the confidence being a new guy to answer. There were a lot of questions about future scheduling and he said something this year. I've got my own grass to mow, when talking about stuff like that. So to me, he was more of a participant this year, a little more comfortable, a little more confident. And it's interesting to me, the guys that they bring, and Billy Napier brings guys based on who he thinks has earned it. It's always going to be an upperclassman. You didn't bring a quarterback. When you bring a quarterback to SEC Media Days, you're naming a starter, and Florida hasn't done that yet. Wasn't ready to. I think from a 10,000-foot view, it was a good day. You didn't get any kind of crazy talk. I think Kingsley Aguakin said something like, I don't like those people talking about Florida State. And that might be the most controversial thing that came out, from the Gators for SEC Media Days. And you can live with that if you're Billy Napier.
Yeah, no, I thought Billy Napier was well-spoken. He's not a guy that's ever going to give you a lot of sound bites, right?
Mm-hmm.
You and I have both had the opportunity to interview him. Certainly you a lot more than me, but he's a guy that's very calculated in what he says, not trying to draw the ire of bulletin board material, not trying to cause a big stir. He's going to talk a lot. He's going to say little. And I think that we saw that. You almost have to read a little bit between the lines or hope for a little bit of a Freudian slip. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But ultimately, Nick, first things first, Gator team, Billy Napier, dressed to the absolute nine. So we got to give some winners here. First winner I'm going to give is to Billy Napier's Taylor, and whoever he gets his suit from. I need to reach out and figure out who that is. Big Hong Kong Andy guy myself, but it might be time for somebody else. Comes dressed in the light gray suit, white shirt, purple tie, just fresh. What'd you think of Billy Napier's outfit?
Solid outfit. I mean, we're coming from a dark place, Dan.
Yeah.
The previous coach set fashion back at least to the 90s.
Yeah.
With the bagginess in the pleats
and the cuffs,
parachute pants with the cuffs.
He was wearing the Jordans, Nick. So everybody was like, you know what? It's not
barely
that bad.
See the Jordans with how wide the pant legs were. Yeah. So Billy looked good. And then I think, to toot my own horn, I think I absolutely nailed what my expectations were going to be for the players. I think Princely looked like he was the chairman of a Fortune 500 company.
He did.
Very dapper, very clean look. Ricky Pearsall looked like the executioner, all black. Rick Wick, John Wick vibes. But then you've got the Louboutin shoes, red bottoms. Definitely had the most drip. And then Jason Marshall, clean outfit, wearing some off-white shoes with the Jason Marshall pendant that I think our boy Kevin Camps designed in terms of a logo. He turned that into a necklace. So I thought Ricky would have the most drip, Marshall would have the best accessories, and then Kingsley would look like he ran a business. And I think I nailed it as far as my projections.
I think we were all kind of on the same boat there. Let's pull up what Kingsley was wearing. This is why you watch us. We're a video platform now. So Kingsley, goes probably a nice charcoal blue, maybe a platinum blue type. Goes with the tie, white shirt. Not 100% tied up there on the tie. That's okay. It's about business for him, right? High expectations for him. A guy that moved into a starting role last year, and this year, a lot of expectations on him. I know Pro Football Focus is high on him, but just a gritty guy. A guy that's looking to go in, go to work, lunch pail kind of guy. But Kingsley looks good. But then, Ricky Pearsall, I think you won, Nick. I'm not sure what your thoughts are, but I think the only thing that you can say about Slick Rick is, clean haircut, black shirt, black suit, has the little emblem on the lapel. But, for all intents and purposes, a little swag. But then you look down, Nick, you got the $2,000 red bottoms. I know that you're a big Christian Louboutin kind of guy yourself. But wearing the spiked $2,000 shoes is, to me, means that NIL maybe it's fixed some of their issues, Nick.
NIL's working. Yeah. Yeah. I saw it's probably the guarantors of the people living at the standard. But like the average income for people living at the standard, which has a lot of football players living there, was like $206,000. So NIL might be working. It's probably the guarantors, as hundreds of people told me on Twitter. Just the joke flying over their heads. Thank you for letting me know.
Let's
mom and dad.
Let's pull up the Louboutins here. You're looking at a nice piece of drip there. No socks, unless they're the no-show socks. Ultimately, that's a statement. You know what I mean, Nick? No
sock could be a weirdo move. You gotta be some no-show socks with those, but you got the spikes. I don't know if that's what you would call that color. Is that iridescent?
That's like an
really
iridescent maroonish color almost.
Mhm.
You know, maybe hard to tell on YouTube. You got, you know, a little gloss to them. I'm gonna go with maroon. You know, Gator Ryan here, our boy Ryan from beautiful Jacksonville, said stole them from the Delatorre closet.
Mhm.
You know,
I
but
would
again,
wear
going
those.
for about $2,000 a shoe right now,
Not 2,000 a shoe, 2,000
or
for
2,000 for a
pair.
pair of shoes.
For
My
a
apologies.
pair.
Yep.
For a
And
pair.
then finally, let's get Jason Marshall on here. This is the content that you guys are all looking for, right? So let's see if I can get a good Jason Marshall photo. There we are. 1 second here. But again, Jason Marshall goes black on black, goes with the bow tie. But you know, I guess the big piece that we have here, Nick, and apologize for this photo. This is what the internet's given us. We've got an MJ mixture, a little Michael Jackson, you know, type logo for our boy Jason Marshall. Would have maybe liked it the other way, but I guess, you know, when the J, you know, swings to the left, that would be kind of an off-center logo. But shout out to Kevin Camps. But that's you know, that's a piece of drip right there, Nick.
Here's one for you, Dan. I'm gonna throw in the private chat. You can get all three of them together. It's the black on black was the look, not Princely, but you get Jason Marshall and Ricky Pearsall, two guys opting for the black shirt. Is that business? Is that flashy business, perhaps?
You know, Nick, I'm not a huge black on black guy. I do know, you know, a little peek into my past history. When I went to prom my senior year, I did the black on black. You know, but maybe it's coming back. But you can see here, you know, the guys are dressed to impress. Nick or Jason Marshall goes in with the black Nikes, green outline.
They're off-white.
They're off-white.
That's Off-White was the brand. Those are Off-White times Nike.
What do I know? And then there we are with Ricky Pearsall, and then, you know, Kingsley Aguakin ready to you know, fire off some trades on the day trading floor. I love it. So Nick, enough about the drip and the outfit. I'll say you won for the swag awards last week. But the three of them spoke again. You know, Kingsley mentioned that he didn't like those guys. Got a retweet from Jordan Travis, FSU quarterback, saying, you know, hey, a little bulletin board material. But Nick, what were your thoughts on the three of them?
Yeah, I thought everyone was good. I think the biggest thing in today's day and age, you don't want bulletin board material, but this is also a chance in the age of NIL to brand yourself, and guys have the opportunity to get in front of the biggest stage possible that isn't, you know, catching a touchdown in the national championship. This is the kickoff of the season, at least in my mind and a lot of people's minds. When you get SC Media Days, that's the start of everything. So I think bringing these guys is a chance, not only a nice reward for them, for some older guys on the roster. You think Kingsley is a fifth-year senior, Ricky's a fifth-year senior, and Jason Marshall has the potential to be a late first, second round pick in the draft. One of the better cornerbacks in a league that has the best cornerbacks across the country. So I think that was a big opportunity for these guys to market themselves, to brand themselves, and then also you get to fly in a private jet and go to Nashville. I think some of the guys would have liked some more time in Nashville. I think it's a quick trip. You fly up, you go through the media car wash, and then you're out of there. Would have enjoyed some more time on Broadway, probably.
Yeah, no, good picture of Slick Rick looking out the window of the PJ. You know, I don't know if that's his first time on the PJ. I would imagine very few of them have actually had that chance to fly in one of the smaller planes that Florida has. But really,
not everyone's as fortunate as you, Dan. Some of us fly coach.
I've only done it twice, Nick, and let me tell you, if I could afford to do it every time, I mean, not much like a PJ out there, Nick. You know.
Never been, Dan.
Never been. All right. So let's get into a couple of quotes from Media Days. Let's give a quick shout out to our friends over at the Gatorverse first. They just had their exhibition game this past weekend. They did a fan fest over at Santa Fe College this past weekend. Looked like a huge, overwhelming success. I know the players were all there together. They rented a house together, which was really, really cool. They had a big cookout and barbecue. I know Billy Donovan was there. I know Todd Golden was there. I know a number of former Gator legends were there in town. So they did this as an exhibition on, they did this preceding an exhibition event that they had on Saturday at Santa Fe. Looked well attended. Looked like the crowd was in it, but ultimately a really cool event to support NIL at the University of Florida. So go check them out, GATA Verse, VERSE.io, and go support your athletes. They do have a TBT team that has Torian Green and Lee Humphrey. Matt McCall's the coach. Corey Brewer's on the team. Igor Kulichev, a number of players. They're going to be teeing off here soon in Louisville, are tipping off here in Louisville soon. So go support them. Go support the athletes. Gataverse.io, and go support the newest newest Florida Gator NIL platform. All right, so let's get into a couple of quotes from Billy Napier. Starts off talking about vacation, that kind of stuff. But then he gets into SEC football. This is a quote that stuck out to me. Their passion, their competition, their desire to win. The margin of error is small in this league. We know that. We lost 5 really close games, 1-score games, even into the final few minutes of the games. There's mismatched players. There's quality depth. Combine that with caliber of personnel, the diversity of scheme, and great coaching. And he goes on, talks about the SEC. But the thing that stuck out to me, Nick, is Billy Napier saying, hey, I know our record, finished 6-7. They lose those 5 games. Trying to temper, a little bit of the fan base to say, hey, why'd we do so bad last year? When he said, hey, we were really in the game and, 5 or 6 of the games that the Gators had.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of one-possession games, one-score games, games you can point to one possession or 2 plays that could have swung the balance in a different direction. So when you look at Florida's roster coming back, obviously there's a little bit uncertainty at quarterback. There was uncertainty going into last year. I thought, and I think this podcast thought, that Anthony Richardson was him. But we hadn't seen it yet because he didn't have experience. Now you've got a quarterback in Graham Mertz with more than 30. Billy loves talking about this. More than 30 starts, 32 to be exact. I think you bring back a lot of players. For my money, I don't know if it is the best, but I don't know that you can find a much better running back room than what Florida has with Etienne, Johnson, Cam Carroll, Trayon Webb. I think that's as good as it gets. And then you look at the offensive line. Can Florida run the ball? Can Graham Mertz do enough, or Jack Miller? Can Graham Mertz or Jack Miller do enough to keep defenses honest? And then looking at the defensive side of the ball, everyone I've talked to says that this is going to be an aggressive style defense. They're going to come after the quarterback. They're going to blitz from different positions, different players, different spots on the field. And then what do you get from veterans in RJ Moten and Trahaja Mitchell? So the defense, I hate when fans say this because it can always get worse, but the defense can't be much worse than it was last year. Please don't prove me wrong on that. But the defense should be better. Florida's schedule is just brutal. Yeah. It's just a brutal schedule. I think I'm coming around. Last year, I thought Florida would be like 6-7 wins. And then I think as the season got closer, I got wrapped up in all of the podcasts I was doing and let you guys kind of talk me into like 7.5, 8 wins. I'm still sitting between like 6-7 wins for this team. The schedule is just tough. You got to get some wins on the front end because that back portion of the schedule with Georgia, Arkansas, LSU, Florida State, a trip to Missouri, which is like the biggest trap game to me. It's going to be an 11 a.m. kickoff, more than likely. There'll be 8,000 people at the stadium. It's late in November. It's going to be cold. The sun normally doesn't show up in the state of Missouri in the month of November.
Yeah, just in general. Goes away. Goes on vacation. It goes to Boone, North Carolina.
Yeah. So like that's a tough. Like you got to get some wins early on in the year for me, and there's opportunity. I'm not big on Tennessee. That's going to be Joe Milton, who we've seen a ton of. We've seen a bunch of Joe Milton, and I don't know why he's getting a Heisman hype or dark horse Heisman hype. I think Florida can take care of business at home against Tennessee. Tennessee has not won in the Swamp in 9 straight trips. It will be 20 full years of futility in Gainesville for Tennessee if they lose this year, which I think I will be picking Florida to win. So to me, you have to win some of those close games, and you got to win early if you're the Florida Gators, because that back 6 games on the schedule is brutal.
Yeah, no, the schedule of the next 2 years certainly is going to be challenging for the Gators, regardless of how talented they are or not. You know, this year you have Utah and Florida State. Next year you have UCF, Miami, and Florida State out of conference. I think you throw in Sanford next year. This year you got UT, Chattanooga, and who else? Nicholls State or somebody else.
Charlotte.
Charlotte. So, hopefully 2 wins there, but that Utah game is going to be a big deal, as well. And then, like you said, Nick, I'm not as high on Joe Milton as, SEC writers seem to be. I know Andy Staples has come around on him. He drafted him early. They had a 10 quarterback draft yesterday, him and Jesse Simonton from On 3 there. I'm not super high on Joe Milton. I think that Hendon Hooker kind of caught lightning in the bottle last year. He took Joe Milton's spot. Joe Milton struggled. He was pretty good, but not great in high school. Obviously goes to Michigan, doesn't earn that spot, transfers to Tennessee. Now he's another, 5th or 6th year senior. Just not super high on him the same way. Tennessee had a bad defense last year. They lost some talent. I don't think that they really replenished that either. Now, I think Josh Heupel is a good coach. He's a good coach, kind of reminds you a little bit of maybe a Dan Mullen, that his offense is always going to be strong, but the defensive part of it makes me really wonder how much hype Tennessee's getting this year. But anyway, let's get back to some more.
If Joe Milton, I'll take this stance. If
Yeah.
Joe Milton is great, then we just have to tip our cap to Josh Heupel. Because Joe Milton's he's okay. He's a fine quarterback. Wasn't great at Michigan, hasn't been great at Tennessee. If Joe Milton goes off this year, then we just need to tip our cap to Josh Heupel and be like, listen, this clearly is just an offense and an offensive system that is easy for quarterbacks and is going to highlight the quarterback. And we might need to start studying what Josh Heupel is doing offensively. If Joe Milton has a Hendon Hooker type year this year.
Right. Absolutely. So let's see. And then Billy Napier spoke to Josh Pate of 247 there. I thought it was a really good down-to-earth interview. Here's what he had to say about the team. Trying to set this up because there's a much longer quote. It talked about, kind of what the difference. And we talked to Billy Napier when we interviewed him a few months ago, kind of about the same question. Well, let's just read the whole thing. So bear with us. I think in January, after the season, we went through an extensive detailed review of year 1 at Florida as an entire organization, each individual, each department, what worked, what didn't work, how do we adjust, how do we adapt, how do we evolve? We started that process getting our 23 team ready to go. This is a new group of players that we have and a few staff dynamics. But one thing that I'm encouraged about is we have 97% of our team that was with us in January. We had 27 mid-year players. We have a great group of veterans that have experience and wisdom from the past. We brought in an influx of young talent, and I feel really good about what we did in the portal. We added 10,000 starts. 10,000 snaps. Sorry, a little typo here. 123 starts with that group. I'm excited about the compound effect we have going into year 2, the consistency of process, consistency in our systems. Nick, I think the 10,000 snaps, 123 starts, and we'll talk a little bit about a bit of a Freudian slip that he had with Graham Mertz, but I think, when you look at the transfer portal and what Florida was trying to do this year was to really fill gaps into where they feel like they needed to improve and get better. And you look at guys like RJ Moten, Micah Mazuka, Cam Jackson, Taraji Mitchell. There's some, other names that I'm sure that I'm missing there. Cam Carroll, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going in and beefing up some areas where they're weak, but more importantly, they just didn't go after the former 4-star, the former 5-star. And we'll talk about Keontae Goodwin here in a moment. But they went after players that have consistently been 1, 2, 3-year starters, or at least played significant playing time. I think that when you look at transfer portal rankings, a lot of people looked at, this is what Florida State did, or this is what that school did. I think Florida went out and found a really good group of veterans that's going to help a very, very young team. What are your thoughts on what Napier said?
I think Florida did. I took some strong stances about how they handled the spring portal. I think Florida as a staff, they're going to go through their process. That spring portal is not built for their process. It's speed dating, it's Tinder, it's swiping, and Florida is more in the 1800s. We need to court you. We need to sit down in your living room with our parents, and everyone needs to get to know each other. We got to get your verified height, length, speed, all of that. So they also just didn't think that there was a ton of talent in the spring portal. So maybe they would have altered the way that they were working. But in the first portal in December, you can't argue that they didn't get more talented. Getting
right.
Cam Carroll, Micah Mazuka, Taraji Mitchell, the guys they brought in are going to be instant impacts for the team, and adding that kind of depth and experience, and I think will be invaluable for the team. So I think my comments in the spring got kind of grew legs and ran, but I think Florida's transfer portal class is great. You're going to get starters. Now, I think you need to watch the health of some of these guys. What will Micah Mazuka look like when he gets back on the practice field? It's a shoulder surgery, having gone through a labrum injury in high school. That's a lot of pushing. Pushing hurts. You need that labrum tear that I had. You need to be able to get the strength back to push. And then you think, what was an offensive lineman doing? Well, they're pushing 300-pound men who are pushing back at them. So that's something that I'm going to want to see. How does he look? How does he look coming back from that injury? Taraji Mitchell took a lot of time off in the spring, and I think that was just load management, but I expect him probably to win that job over Derek Wingo at middle linebacker. There'll be a rotation, but I think he'll be a guy that starts. And then I don't know if it's a surprise to me. I don't think it's much of a surprise, but I think RJ Moten will win a starting job next to Miguel Mitchell over Kamari Wilson. And I wrote that on Saturday, and I think I'm excited to see what he looks like at safety. A guy who came in late in the portal. We didn't get to see him in the spring camp, but I think he's a guy who brings a ton of depth, a ton of experience to a room that had no experience and really no depth. When you're moving over a fifth-year wide receiver just to fill out the room, it tells you all you need to know about what you thought of the depth going into, spring camp at safety.
Right. Yeah, no, I liked RJ Moten take, and I know a lot of fans are excited about, Kamari Wilson. Not saying that Kamari can't be a potentially good or great safety at the University of Florida, but I think when you look at what Florida desperately needs help in, last year they got burned at safety numerous times per game, right? You need that experience. You need that reliable person, right? Maybe it's not the biggest hitter, the flashiest player, or the fastest player, but it's that consistency, and what Florida has now is options. And what's even great about those options, Nick, is that those options are continuing to grow. They've recruited really well, especially last year at the defensive back position. This year, they're doing pretty well as well. But at the end of the day, Florida has a lot of stopgaps, right? I think if you look at Florida's blue chip percentage count right now, it's 63%, but a high majority of those guys are freshmen and sophomores, right? So now you go in, you find your Cam Jacksons, right? Be able to fill, that gap in on the front of the defensive line there. You go and you find experience in a very athletic, highly ranked 4-star guy out of high school, struggled with injuries at Ohio State, and Taraji Mitchell, RJ Moat, and again, a guy started at Michigan, ultimately ends up losing his spot, but comes in, good experience there. You go on the offensive side of the ball, obviously, Graham Mertz, and you can have your opinion on Graham Mertz, and we're going to talk a little bit more about him in a second. But again, 32 starts under his belt, had a lot of success. Wisconsin fired their head coach last year. Did Graham Mertz put up the numbers that, being the 45th ranked, player out of his high school class? Probably not. But does that mean he's not talented? Does that mean that, with the right coaching, the right sports psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever it might be, that talks to them and really gets them mentally secure, or is he able to make those short to intermediate throws where Florida really was hindered last year, right? Then you go and you get your Cam Carrolls, you go and you get your Micah Mazuka, who is a highly rated guy on Pro Football Focus from Baylor. You go and get Damian George from Alabama. Ultimately, you get Keontae Goodwin as well, former 5-star. We'll talk about him again here in a second, but you go and you fill these areas and these gaps that Florida had. And, maybe it's not the flashiest class, but, when you look at it, I'd take any of these guys right now. And this isn't me being a homer, over taking the second-ranked best tight end in the class, and that was Jaheim Bell, right, who scorched Florida for 6 total yards last year. So, again, I think that you need to add a little bit more thought into what Florida tried to do in the transfer portal. And, when you think about it that way, when you look at it, the number of snaps, the number of starts, I think that Billy Napier, makes obviously a great point there. Nick, let's get into let's just put a quick pause on SEC Media Days. Let's talk a little bit about Keontae Goodwin. Keontae Goodwin, the former 5-star transfer from Kentucky, on Thursday was announced, Friday, was announced that he's going to leave the program, apply for a NCAA medical hardship waiver to transfer close to his mother, who was diagnosed with cancer. So our thoughts and prayers are with the Goodwin family right now. But Nick, want to get your perspective on what that means for the offensive line.
Yeah, it first off, prayers and thoughts with him and his mother, and just hoping hoping for nothing but the best for them in a tough situation. I think you're making probably a difficult but easy decision when faced with something like that. Get closer to your mom, be closer to family, and be a support system. For Florida, I think it changes the offensive line a little bit. Keontae and Damian had kind of both played right guard, right tackle. George more of a swing guy, but now I think Damian George, you have to look at him as your starting right tackle. I know you got the guy from FIU that can't be your starter. So you need Damian George, who Cole Kubelik talked to Zach Alberverdi at SC Media Days and was talking just how highly Nick Saban viewed and valued Damian George, who was a starter in 21, lost his starting job after a bad Iron Bowl that season, but somebody that Florida will have to count on. And when I look at Florida's offense, you're going to have to run the ball. And I was fine. I felt good about Florida's offensive line. And then you look at Austin Barber was a little bit nicked up, played through it in the spring. Micah Mazuka ended up missing the spring. Cameron Waits probably won't be back from his Achilles injury. Now you really start looking at, okay, well, how many guys do you have left? You have, I think, 17 scholarship offensive linemen, including 5 that are freshmen. You're going to have to get something out of Najee Harris. You might have to get something out of Roderick Kearney. And it's a position that is can easily be dinged up, can easily miss some games. Cyrus Torrance, in his consensus All-American season last year, missed a game. Florida just doesn't have the depth. And I think it's fine. I think this coaching staff recruits well, really well this class specifically. You're just going to it's going to take time to reload, to get those numbers back to where you need them to be. So right now, if Florida wants to be the team that we think they do and run the football, you got to start looking at, and at least in my perspective, worrying a little bit about what is the health of the offensive line, how are they, and how will they hold up over a grueling 12-week schedule.
Yeah, no, Nick, you made a good point there. Let's look at the offensive line real quick. Some names that you didn't mention. I know Jalen Farmer, the redshirt freshman, 6'5", 307 pounds. He's a guy that's expected to play. You mentioned Micah Mazuka, Austin Barber, Riley Simmons, probably not going to see much from him. Kingsley Aguakin, again, a guy that Florida's going to rely very heavily on there on the offensive line, the 6'3", 302-pound redshirt junior who's already graduated. He's going to finish his master's degree in December, so shout out to him. Jake Slaughter, a guy that, Florida flipped late in the cycle during his class. Is this his opportunity? Richie Leonard, the fourth, again, a four-star guy out of high school, is now in his third year. You mentioned Roger Kearney, Lindell Hudson's the FIU transfer that you mentioned. But again, you look down and you just don't have a ton of snaps. Do you have some size? Yes. Do you have some talent? Yes. But now is the opportunity. When you look through here, Bryce Lovett, is a freshman. Christian Williams is a redshirt freshman. Let's see. Caden Jones is a freshman. Hayden Clem is a walk-on redshirt sophomore. Roger Kearney, Brian Rosenberg is a walk-on as well. Mark Pitts, a walk-on. Jordan Herman, again, a guy we haven't, seen much about, 6'8", 371 pounds. So you name all of those names and you're like, okay, there's some talent, but that experience level drops off drastically after that starting five or that starting six.
Yeah, Herman's really impressive physically. He'll probably be asked to play. I think Cameron Waits was a guy that would have been asked to play before the Achilles injury. I think Jake Slaughter might be a guy that starts at left guard if Micah Mazuka isn't ready. I think Richie Leonard will be your starting right guard, Damian George at right tackle, Kingsley Aguakin at center, Austin Barber's at left tackle, and then Micah Mazuka will be the starting left guard when he's healthy. But how much, if he can't, let's say he can't go against Utah, I think you'll see Slaughter and Najee Harris kind of split that role. It's an opportunity to get both of the guys some snaps. Jake Slaughter's been around for a while, but hasn't really played a ton. And then Najee Harris, that'll be his first game.
Right.
So in any kind of absence that Micah Mazuka will have, whether it's a game or 2 games, 3 games, or maybe it's none, I think you start to try to get Jake Slaughter and get Najee Harris some reps there. And I think Roger Kearney is being groomed to be the next center. I think it was weird to me because Najee Harris played center in high school and Roger Kearney played guard, and then they get to college and they were like, hey, switch that. Yeah. To me, that you're, especially at center, for Roger Kearney, who didn't play it in high school, to then come in and the game's already faster, the players are bigger, faster, and stronger, and now you've got more responsibility. So I think you saw some snap issues with him at the spring game. That's stuff that'll get ironed out, not something to be freaking out about for the long term. And I think Roger Kearney's being groomed to be the starting center for the next 2 to 3 seasons after Kingsley Aguakin finishes his doctorate degree at Florida, as you pointed out. So I'm not overly concerned. I think today I'm just like raising a little flag to be like, hey, this could be an issue if some of these guys' timetables gets ticked back a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that you're exactly right, Nick. From a top 5 perspective, I'm not worried. Maybe getting a 6 and 7, I'm not as worried. You start to have multiple injuries, there's maybe some cause for concern. But, again, Florida has recruited pretty well. They've got 2 coaches. They've got probably 4 additional assistants and GAs and everything else. So a lot of different staff there focusing on that group. Good brief pause here to give a shout out to our friends over at FanGo Tickets. Go visit them at FanGo. That's FANGO tickets.com. think of it as Airbnb for your season tickets. You can put your season tickets up there for the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Florida Gators. Let's see. There's a few others here in the state of Florida off the top of my head that I'm missing. But you can go and you can put on your tickets. There's no fee if you go on and you want to get somebody's tickets for a game, but you can go and list your entire season tickets up there. You can list what games you want to put up there. You can list what games you don't want to, but it's an easy, seamless process for you to go on to fangotickets.com. Again, think Airbnb for your season tickets. The Florida Gators are on there, Tampa Bay Lightning, Tampa Bay Bucks, Cleveland Browns, if you're up in that area as well. But go check them out, fangotickets.com, started by a University of Florida graduate. So, again, go check them out. Brand new company. So anything that you can do, if you have season tickets, go ahead and list them there. Nick, we get into the defense. Obviously, the defense, Gators struggle very, very much on defense last year. Patrick Toney leaves and goes to the NFL.
I actually saw him. He was on my flight to Rome.
Wow.
Saw Patrick Toney and his wife.
Courtney. Everybody, big fan of the Gators, Courtney Toney was.
Yeah, big fan of Gator Nation.
Her and Megan Mullen probably have a support group.
former wives of former Florida Gators coach support group meets every Wednesday.
So yeah, obviously Gators bring in Austin Armstrong to lead the defense. Billy Napier says, I think the key to playing really good defense, obviously, start with great personnel. And I think having an identity, playing complementary football. I think we have decided to go the direction we have on defense because we want to do that. We have a great working environment, great collaboration between offense and defense. Nick, we're 3 sentences in. We haven't gotten much. It's important that you're on the same page throughout the entire offseason relative to scripting, installation, practice format. I think the defense that you're describing there creates issues because of the variables. I think the variables not only up front, but the pressure variables to go along with the back end. Play good defense are a lot of factors, but I think your practice environment and your approach to complementary football are key. Nick, what'd you take out of that paragraph?
Word salad.
Yeah.
Word salad. I don't know that. Well, I know that Billy Napier feels this way. I don't know if it works or if it makes sense, but he wants to kind of keep things under wraps. Like there's so much tape, and the coaches are going to know what Austin Armstrong's defense looks like. But Billy Napier is not going to be the one that tells you what it looks like before you see it. So I think he wants to take people by surprise. But I from talking to sources, from talking to players, from talking to coaches, it's going to be an aggressive style of defense. And I don't know if it's going to be Todd Grantham Engage 8, the old Madden play. But I think it's you've got a bunch of guys. You've got some really good cornerbacks. Jalen Kimber's a guy who we don't even really talk about that much. He had to play last year for the most part with a hand that needed surgery, playing with a club on. I think you've got some really good defensive linemen in Princely Umamielan, Justice Boone. And then inside, Florida is just massive inside. When you look at Banks, Cam Jackson,
Desmond Watson,
large man, and Chris McClellan. So I think Florida inside, if it's a baseball terminology, but Billy Napier said it also at the SC Media Days, you have to be strong up the middle. And last year I thought Florida was strong up the middle. You had a bunch of veterans at linebacker and safety, but like 100 starts between just your linebackers and obviously Trey Dean. You had a bunch of starts at safety, at linebacker, but you didn't have any kind of depth. Des Watson, I think, was top 5 in snaps last year at 400 plus pounds. You're not going to need him to be top 5 in snaps. You're not going to need Cam Jackson or McClellan to be top 5 in snaps. You have a really solid rotation, and you could have 1,000 pounds of human being at 2 defensive tackles and a nose tackle, depending on the formation. So Florida should be strong up the middle. I think they have really good corners, cover corners in Jason Marshall, and then whoever is going to play on the other side, whether it's Devin or Kimber or whoever takes that role, Jaden Hill. I think you still need to figure out who's going to play nickel. Is that Jadarius Perkins? I don't think the Jaden Hill experiment worked out well in the spring. I don't think he is a nickel. So you're going to have to find a nickel. But Florida's going to be aggressive. And I think based on the size you have inside, guys who can go and get the passer in Princely and Justice, I think Florida's defense should be better. On paper, I didn't expect them to be as bad as they were last year. But on paper, heading into this year, I think they're better.
Yeah, no, I would agree 100%. I think that when you start to think of talent, when you start to think of snaps, and then you ultimately think of where Florida was missing last year, right? It was the safeties. When the safeties are left exposed, that puts a lot of pressure on the defensive backs. Jaden Hill was injured. Jalen Kimber, I give the guy credit. He played with a club for half the season. But again, you didn't see a full healthy secondary there. You add in another season of Devin Moore, growing and learning. You add in some of these freshmen who I expect to play a little bit too. Linebacker, Florida, Ventrell Miller did great for the Gators last year. But again, when he's in wide open space and kind of left on an island, you can only expect so much out of him. They struggled to get to the pass to the quarterback last year. They struggled to stuff at the line of scrimmage as well. You add in and you beef that up. I know Princely, Uman who got the number 1 jersey. Nick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think he wanted it. So here's one thing. Billy Napier does not – he likes the history. Billy Napier does not care about jersey numbers. There was a lot of locker room turmoil last year when Ricky Pearsall got number 1. There were a bunch of players who were like, who is this dude from the Pac-12 coming in and getting this number? There's a ton of history with the number 1. And I don't know if it started with Keywan Ratliff, but that's, at least to my knowledge, kind of where it started with Keywan Ratliff. I talked to Rat after Princely's jersey change came out, and Rat said, I didn't even want number 1. I wanted number 5. And coach just gave me number 1. But when you look at the players who have worn that between Percy, Keywan, Janoris Jenkins, Percy Harvin, Reggie Nelson, Vernon Hargraves, there's a lot of history. That number means something to the fan base. And I think I've told Billy Napier before, he doesn't care. It's just a number to him. But I think if you're looking at anyone on the defense that probably would have deserved it, I think it'd be Princely. And now you have to, what comes with that? The fans expect a certain level of play coming from somebody in that jersey. Princely wanted the jersey, and now he'll have to live with those expectations as well. The last guy who wore him on defense certainly did not live up to any of the expectations and didn't even make it the entire season before being kicked off the team, before being asked to leave.
Yeah, no, Nick, I think you make a great point there. So, Princely Uman, you add him. I think that he's going to be a guy that really surprises this year, ends up making 3rd team All-SAC preseason. We'll talk about that list here in a moment as well. But just looking at the defense, Nick, I'm gonna pull up the roster here. I expect Jakeem Jackson to play. We mentioned Jason Marshall. We mentioned Jalen Kimber. We mentioned Jaden Hill. Does a guy like Dijon Johnson play? Devin Moore, going into his sophomore year. Those are the guys that are going to be heavily relying on. And I'm confident, right? You can even add in Sharif Jackson there, a guy that probably, wasn't talked about a bunch because Jakeem Jackson was the higher ranked guy. Sharif Denson just kind of made his commitment and then just kind of went away and did his thing. And I had a couple of visits in there. People were concerned about Miami and John Ruiz, but, comes in. But a really talented group. I like Jason Marshall and either Jalen Kimber or Devin Moore or Jaden Hill, however that group of 2 or 3 works out. I think they make a great point about nickel. On the defensive line, Chris McClellan, a guy that, showed some flashes last year, committed when Florida didn't even have a coach last year. Will Norman, a guy that we've talked about on this pod, has been getting a ton of praise by his coaches. Again, a lot to expect, out of a freshman, but again, the 6'4", 293-pound player, I expect to see him this year. Des Watson, 6'5", 439. Obviously, we've talked about him. Jalen Humphreys, make or break year for the guy. Redshirt junior, does he get a lot of playing time? Who knows? Caleb Banks, the transfer from Louisville. We've talked a lot about Cam Jackson, the transfer from Memphis. Caleb Banks, a guy that people were high on, didn't have a ton of snaps there at Louisville, but again, 6'6", 323 pounds there. Tyreek Sapp, redshirt sophomore. Is this his breakout year, right? You have Gavin Hill, you have Jamari Lyons, you have, some names on here. And then obviously you finish with Cam Jackson there on everything but the edge. And then you look at Princely Uman-Milan, Kelby Collins, a guy that flashed in the spring and, has been talked about very heavily. Justice Boone showed some flashes last year. TJ Searcy, the highly ranked, 4-star. Cameron James, he's coming over. Jack Pyburn. So again, you're talking about a list of names that, again, young, limited experience, but, this is, an opportunity where Florida really can get better, in my opinion, and getting after the pass rusher and setting that edge. At linebacker, we haven't mentioned Shamar James. Could be a breakout year for him. Derek Wingo, Scooby Williams, Taraji Mitchell, Deuce Spurlock, the transfer from Michigan, Jaden Robinson, the freshman, Manny Nunnery, the transfer from Houston that I've heard some good things about. Let's see. And then you have the transfer from Temple, Kenny Anahi. So again, inside linebacker, you've got some players there as well. Now it's a matter of them, putting it all together. And then going to safety, we have Kamari Wilson, Miguel Mitchell, Jordan Castell, the freshman, RJ Moten, Bryce Thornton, Jadarius Perkins, Dakota Mitchell, and Jamarcus Weston, the former wide receiver that moved to safety. Don't know how much you can expect out of him, but that first, 6 names, Kamari Wilson, Miguel Mitchell, Jordan Castell, RJ Moten, Bryce Thornton, and Jadarius Perkins, I expect to hear from this year, and throw in Dakota Mitchell as well.
A lot of guys.
A lot of unproven guys, Nick.
Yeah. That's going to be part of it. You're going to have, as you start to take over a team, and listen, Mel Tucker was able to catch, like lightning in a bottle at Michigan State by going through the portal. You're watching Mike Norvell at Florida State build his team through the portal. The question of, is that sustainable, comes to mind. It has not been sustainable for Michigan State. Mel got the bag, but the team was terrible last year. And what would they look like this year? Florida State, everyone's talking about Florida State as a top 10 team, a playoff dark horse. I think Jordan Travis is great. They got a bunch of guys back. Jared Verse got a bunch of guys back and added some big names in the portal. I think what you've seen Billy Napier do is really focus on rebuilding the team through high school recruiting while adding pieces that can play significant playing time in the interim through the portal. So I like the way that they're building. I think this staff is really dedicated to recruiting at the high school level. And that should be exciting. It doesn't make for an instant change, instant success. No. I think Florida will struggle at times this year. That's why I'm not overly concerned about what is the overall record this year. Florida's not going to win the SEC. They're not going to win the SEC East. They're not going to compete to beat Georgia and win the SEC. But do you see progression? Those guys that are freshmen, I think, have an opportunity to get valuable playing time this year. And you start building for 2024 with another absolutely brutal schedule.
So again, a lot of names that we mentioned there, a lot of unknown, skill, but again, highly ranked guys that you should expect things from, right? And that's ultimately where Florida needs to get back to, is when they get these highly ranked freshmen, are they able to get them in? Are they able to get snaps? Are they able to improve and get better? But there's a lot of reason to be excited, although it can be cautious optimism. It could even be Dan's a homer and he's just rattling off all these names because he just read through the roster, right? But, when you look at linebacker, you get a lot more athletic. Ventrell Miller struggled in coverage last year, right? Shamar James, a lot more athletic. Taraji Mitchell could be a lot more athletic. Deuce Spurlock, a guy that's very athletic. We'll see if it transfers over to the SEC. Manny Nunnery, you're talking more athleticism out of these guys. Hopefully it all, for the Gators' sake, gets put into practice. But again, it's hard not to be excited about some of these young guys, your Kelby Collins, your TJ Searcy's, those kind of folks. Let's get back into some things that he said at SEC Media Days. All right. Dealing with transition. I think I've had the transition questioned quite a bit. I think there's three really variables that were a really big adjustment. There's no question the pace of recruiting. This is my first time at the Power 5 level with an early signing period, and how that has affected the recruiting calendar, the workflow, the evaluation process, and the recruitment process. Quick pause there. We talked to him about this. And, when he came over, he had 6 weeks before early signing. No, just a few weeks, before early signing. I think it was 3. You're trying to bring on a staff. You're trying to close on some of these guys. You get in a Devin Moore, you get in a Kamari Wilson, but really only a few weeks. By the way, you're also trying to hire 100 staff members, including coaches, picking it back up. There's definitely been an adjustment. I think year 1 to year 2, we've made good improvements in that area. I also think it's a heck of a year to take over a program with the portal and NIL coming to the forefront. Those were challenging. In particular, you're trying to establish trust in a really short amount of time, and those create a dynamic on your team that can be challenging. So I think we've come up with a really good system to attack those areas, and I'm pleased with the progress we're making. Again, each part of this, it's very fluid, and we'll continue to adjust and adapt as we go. But I'm very pleased with the year 1 to year 2 transition relative to the recruiting calendar, NIL, and certainly the portal. Nick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's kind of what I was talking about, the way that they're deciding to build. And you can build for instant success, flash in the pan, or build for the long term. And I think if you look at what Dan Mullen was able to do, he won with Jim McElwain's guys. They won early, they won quickly. And then the way that Dan and his staff recruited, they didn't have the players to continue winning, and they weren't recruiting at that level. And I think maybe some of us were short-sighted in what the process was going to be. What was Billy Napier inheriting, and what would he have to do to turn this around? And I think the option they did was a complete teardown. We're tearing it down to the foundation and building it back up. So you have to nail some things in the portal just to stay competitive. But I think they're building, like I said before, they're building through high school recruiting and building the right way. And then also I think you have to nail your quarterback. They went through an exhaustive search in Billy Napier's words to land on Graham Mertz. But to me, if you're not in win now mode, you're building for the future. And there's not a better quarterback in my mind. I know there's some guys rated higher than him, whether it's on 3 or 247 or Rivals, but there's not a better guy to build around than DJ Lagway, just as a person, as a prospect, and as a player. So you're building your roster for when your quarterback gets to your team in December. Yes, you have 12 games, 13 games before then, but you're building for that in my mind.
Yeah, maybe even 15 games, Nick, who knows?
Probably not 15.
Probably
games.
not 15 games. No, I think that you can see, transitioning to any new job is hard. Imagine taking over an organization that's struggling, and you're expected to turn around right away. That doesn't happen often at the Fortune 500 level. It doesn't happen at the Fortune 1000, and it often doesn't even happen at the SMB size of business, right?
What about the penny stock size?
Penny stocks, Nick, the investment in my future has been poor on one particular stock. We are breaking records each and every week. I've never found a stock, Nick, in my entire life, and I have a few dollars invested in the stock market these days, that has ever consistently gone down 3 to 5% every day. The thing about going down 3 to 5% every day is you could theoretically go down forever. But again, I'm sure you're wondering, Harrison, I know you're watching, have the financials been released for my Life Wallet investment?
Of course, by now.
We are probably 54 weeks since the last actual financials came out. We are riding the struggle bus. And I think our CEO is realizing that his nonsensical tweeting and lack of focus on my investment is no longer the best path to build good favor with investors. So he has since stopped tweeting, much to my dismay. But I think that when you take over any organization, going back to the actual point here, is it takes time, right? Some things happen quick. Sometimes you can have a really quick turnaround, and sometimes you can't. It doesn't necessarily mean that the person that was hired is the right leader forever. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work out. But when any time that you're taking over an entity that has been struggling and has the need to make a change at the top level position, that there's going to take time, and not everything's going to be perfect, and you're not going to agree with everything, but you have to be able to buy into their vision. And I think the way that you look at the staff that he's built around, the way that he's been able to replace some of his staff members that have been lost. And then you look at areas where they struggled. They struggled in NIL, seemingly getting figured out. Florida Victorious is obviously, and the Gatorverse have been great assets to that. But that's starting to get figured out a little bit more. From a high school recruiting perspective, I mean, it's hard to look at Florida and say, hey, things haven't gotten better. Right now, Florida is the number 3 class in the country. They're ahead of Alabama right now. They're ahead of all their in-state rivals. They're number 2 in the SEC. That's where you want to be, right? You got to continue to build talent. You got to continue to get better. And, Florida didn't finish the last 2 recruiting classes where they probably wanted to finish, but things are getting better, and you're making that steady improvement that now you continue all of those names that we just mentioned, right? Hopefully those aren't just names in the future. You have to build off that. You have to trust your ability to go out, recruit, identify, and ultimately secure that talent. But right now it seems like a lot of those transitionary period things that really plagued Florida are seemingly getting a lot better, at least from what I can tell. And probably one of the biggest things that you can notice is obviously they had some staff turnover. You had some coaches go to the NFL and stuff like that. But from a support staff perspective, they kept probably 90% of that support staff in place. Those are the keys and the building blocks to the future.
Yeah. And I think it's important to stay the course. Just society that we live in right now is instant gratification. You want it now. And there wasn't a lot to hang your hat on in 2023. There might not be a lot to hang your hat on in 2024. I think you need to win games at home. You need to win a rivalry, beat Tennessee, beat Florida State. If you can win those 2 games, even in a 6-6 regular season, I think that shows, okay, you're making progress. These are games you lost a year ago. But games that you're now winning, even when the roster isn't where it needs to be.
Absolutely. All right, let's give a quick pause and do a quick sponsorship announcement to our friends at Home Field Apparel, wearing one of their shirts right now. So go visit homefieldapparel.com. Use promo code Stadium and Gale at checkout. It'll get you 15% off of your first order. You guys know the work around that if you've ordered more than once. But again, probably about 20 different University of Florida t-shirts. They also have a really cool starter looking jacket with the old Fighting Gator logo on it that I think is really, really cool. I don't know if I have enough swag to pull it off, Nick, but I'm sure Silk does, and you do as well. But go check them out, homefieldapparel.com. Premium cotton. It feels great, lightweight, really good product. So again, go check them out, homefieldapparel.com. Promo code Stadium and Gale, all one word at checkout. Nick, I think that is going to wrap up SEC Media Days. Any additional thoughts before we get into where you guys as the media ranked them and everything else?
A Freudian slip from Billy Napier on Andy Staples' show. I have it pulled up. Andy was talking to him about the team and the systems on offense. And Billy Napier said, ultimately, we have a great system that distributes the ball depending on how the defense aligns. We just need Graham to make great decisions. Florida has not named a quarterback. I don't think anyone will be surprised when Graham Mertz is named the starting quarterback. Maybe Jack Miller will be. But it's what we've expected. We've expected Graham to win the job. He came in as a guy who has a ton of starts. He has 31 more starts despite or actually they've been in the college around the same time. 31 more starts than Jack Miller. And I think it's Graham's job to lose, and it has been since he got to Florida. And I think Billy Napier knows that. And despite not wanting to say it, I think there was a little Freudian slip there when talking to Andy.
No, I think that you can expect Graham Mertz for at least this season to be the starter. All right.
Got 2 years of eligibility left.
Got 2 years of eligibility left. All right. So, Nick, the preseason football media poll and all SEC teams were announced. Nick, did you vote in this or did you have to be present to vote?
I voted.
Okay. All right. So, in the Eastern Division, you have Georgia finished first with 265 first place votes. Tennessee second with 14 first place votes. Then South Carolina with 3. Then Kentucky with 1. Then Florida comes in 5th in the Eastern Division. Then Missouri and then Vanderbilt. But an important thing to note, Nick, Vanderbilt 3rd in the SEC East with 8 first place votes. Nick, speak for your profession.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of people they really like to tout how many media members get credentialed for this, and I think they would credential Stadium and Gale if we wanted to go to Dallas next year.
Whoa.
No, I'm just saying if Stadium and Gale wanted to go to Dallas and sit on Radio Row, we could probably do that next year.
Isn't it in Dallas next year? Yeah.
Yes, that's what I just said. Yes.
Sorry, I missed it.
But I think some people try to be funny. To me, it just takes away the validity of these preseason polls. The fact that Vanderbilt has a single non-last place vote takes away the validity of the poll. It's a team that I think won one SEC game last year, maybe. One or two, beat Florida. But it's not funny to me. If that was your vote.
Yeah, eight jokesters in the crowd out of 291 that voted on the East. But again, that order is Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, Kentucky, Florida, Missouri, and Vanderbilt. On the Western Division, I didn't know we called them Eastern and Western divisions. I thought they were just the East Division and the West Division, but this is from SECsports.com, so I'm going to trust them. Alabama finishes first with 165 votes. Close second, LSU with 117. Texas A&M third. They get one lone first place vote. Got to know who that person is. Got to pull their credentials too. Then Ole Miss. Then Arkansas gets 3 first place votes. Auburn 4 first place votes. And then finishing out the Western Division, Mississippi State, who gets 1 first place vote. Nick, your thoughts on the West? Who'd you vote for, Alabama or LSU?
I voted for LSU. Also, then going back to the East, I had Florida 3rd. I think behind Tennessee. I think Tennessee will have 3 SEC losses with Alabama. And I also have Florida beating them. I think Florida loses to Kentucky, though. And I've said that before. Mark Stoops coached circles around Dan Mullen. I think he coached circles around Billy Napier last year. He's built a team in his likeness for a decade now. I think he's been at Kentucky for more than 10 years. And just an unbelievable defensive coach and defensive play caller, game planner. And Florida has to go up there. I don't know what Devin Leary will be, especially coming off of the injury.
Florida didn't look at him. Florida passed on him. There was interest from him.
So the East kind of to me is Georgia and then the 6 other teams. And then the West I think is a little more interesting with LSU and Alabama. Texas A&M, I'm really interested. I think that's going to be made for TV with Bobby Petrino and Jimbo Fisher. Is Petrino calling plays? Is Jimbo calling plays? What's the dynamic behind closed doors? And then do we see them yelling at each other on the sideline, during games? So that to me is really interesting. But to me, it's a 2-team race in the West and then Georgia and the other guys in the East.
Speaking of a comment that you just made, we skipped over it. Billy Napier said that he will still keep calling plays for the Gators. We've talked a lot about it on this show. You get to a certain point in your career because you've done one thing. For Billy Napier, he got hired to be a head coach for the first time because of his ability to call offense. Built up Louisiana. Ultimately, a lot of these guys feel, once they get that experience, they do feel like the smartest person in the room. Sometimes that ego can come down and bite them. Sometimes they're somebody that likes to pass off that responsibility and are okay with doing that. But you also have to remember that these guys got to that level because of that experience as well. But Billy Napier will be calling plays, whether you are a fan of that or not. SEC champion. These are the schools that received votes. Georgia, 181 points. Then Alabama, 62. LSU, 31. Tennessee, 5. Vanderbilt, 5. Arkansas, 2. Auburn, 2. Texas A&M, 1. Mississippi State, 1. And South Carolina, 1. So of the 8 people that voted on Vanderbilt to win the SEC East, whoever the corresponding team in the West is, they have Vanderbilt going 5-3 against those programs. So, Nick, Georgia, I think a very easy selection for SEC champion. Then you have Alabama, LSU, then Tennessee and Vanderbilt. But seems like a 3-team race there with Georgia, Alabama, and LSU. Let's get into the 2023 preseason media days all SEC team. Nick, you have to go down to the 3rd team in which you see Trevor Etienne on offense, and then on defense, you have Prince Milan and Jason Marshall as a 3rd team on the defense, respectively. Are you surprised there's not more? You think any names missing? Tyron Hopper, former Florida Gator linebacker, is on the 2nd team. He's at Missouri now. But Nick, any thoughts there?
I don't know why Montrell Johnson's not getting any of the hype. To me, Johnson and Etienne are so similar, not similar in their play style, but like in projections, production value to me. I think those guys are so similar, and Montrell Johnson's not being talked about at all. So
you think it's a little name recognition with the
I don't know, because like Montrell nearly rushed for 1,000 yards as a freshman. Granted, it was in the Sun Belt. Comes to Florida, leads the Gators in yards, carries, touchdowns, and then is nowhere to be found on any of these lists. So to me, I'm looking at that and I'm like, Montrell's getting snubbed on some of these lists. I don't know that. Listen, I can't get angry. I can't sit here and say I think Florida's a 6-win team, 7-win team, and then make a gigantic case for, well, they should have some guys on the first team all SEC. Like, could Jason Marshall be that? Yes. Did his production and his play last year warrant it? No. Was he used correctly? I don't think so. And if used correctly this year, more press man, then yeah, I think he'll be on a postseason first team or second team. But his play in 2022 didn't warrant him to be on the 2023 first team in the preseason. And Princely, I think, is a guy, if he gets to double-digit sacks, could find his way on a first team preseason or postseason all SEC list. But to me, I think I don't understand why nobody's talking about Montrell outside of like maybe a couple people in Gainesville. But nationally, it seems like everyone is Trevor Etienne, and nobody's talking about Montrell when, in my mind, they're kind of interchangeable.
Right. No, I would 100% agree. And I do think a little bit of it has to do with some name recognition. Some other names that, again, you're not talking about a lot of people. Ricky Pearsall is a guy that, Florida fans are high on. There's only 6 total receivers, 7 total, that got selected. For some reason, the second team has 3 wide receivers. Maybe they tied. Looks like they did. I don't think that, Ricky Pearsall is necessarily better than any of them. Strangely, they don't choose 2 tackles, 2 guards, and a center for the offensive line. They just choose 1 center and 4 offensive linemen. I think Austin Barber is a guy whose name could be on there at the end of the year. but I don't think that there's a lot of names missing. Unfortunately, Florida doesn't get any love at the punter position, Nick. I know that you're probably disappointed about that. But again, this is an opportunity for Florida to really go and show out, right? There's zero to very low expectations of this team and how they're going to perform. You have a lot of just names that are there. So this is the opportunity to go and compete and try to prove that you deserve more than 3 names on this list. But we do want to give a quick congratulations to Jason Marshall, Princey Umanmielen, and Trevor Etienne for making that list. Nick, let's get into the cookout. We may be there. This is a recruiting talk. Stadium and Gale may be pulling up, so a good opportunity for the 3 of us to get together. But before we do that, Nick, before we get into recruiting talk, let's give one final shout out to our sponsor that keeps this show going, Home Field, go visit Alumni Hall. Friends over at Alumni Hall on Archer Road, or go visit them online at alumnihall.com. That is where you're going to find your coaches' polos, your Nike and your Jordan gear, your cookout accessories, your tents, your blankets, your ornaments for the Christmas tree, your grilling supplies, whatever it might be. Alumni Hall has the best selection of Florida Gators clothing, accessories, and utilities, things of that nature, in all of Gainesville, Florida. So go visit them, alumnihall.com, or go visit them on Archer Road. That Lululemon that I talked about before is not there anymore. So it is on Archer Road. It is just past the new Chick-fil-A, right there on the corner. You know it, alumnihall.com, the best of Florida Gators apparel in Gainesville. Nick, we've got an exhaustive list here, my friend. So I'm going to go through this. I'm going to do my best. This is 2024 and 2025 list. We are going to start with some commits and then go from there. So confirmed plans to visit: 5-star quarterback DJ Lagway, 5-star safety Xavier Filisame, 4-star linebacker Aaron Childs, 4-star linebacker Miles Graham, 4-star wide receiver Jeray Tank Hawkins, 4-star linebacker Adarius Hayes. All Gator commits. 4-star cornerback Jamari Howard, who's looking at UF, FSU, Miami, Michigan State, and UCF. Commits again. Amir Jackson, 4-star tight end. 4-star edge Kendall Jackson. Not a long commute for him there in Gainesville. 4-star cornerback Wardell Mack, who is a Texas, LSU, and UF battle. 4-star linebacker, 3-star on 3, Jamonte Waller. 4-star offensive tackle and new commit Fletcher Westfall. 4-star edge Amaris Williams. 3-star defensive lineman, Micah Boyro. 3-star safety Josiah Davis. 3-star cornerback Teddy Foster. 3-star offensive lineman Marcus Mascall. 3-star offensive lineman Noel Portjigin, coming from Germany, in Schwabish Hall, and 3-star offensive lineman Mike Williams. A ton of Florida commits, a few that are uncommitted, but you get most of the class here. And then 2025 players that are going to be attending: 5-star safety DJ Pickett, the number 8 player in the country; 4-star linebacker Tarvos Alford, the number 10 linebacker in the country; 4-star running back Waltez Clark from Plant High School here in Tampa, Florida, one of UF's top targets; 4-star wide receiver Kobe Howard, the number 45 player in Florida; 4-star linebacker Riley Pettijohn from Texas, the number 9 overall player in Texas, 4-star offensive tackle Owen Strabig, who's a top 100 national recruit from Wisconsin; 4-star safety Hilton Stubbs from Vares High School, Mandarin High School there in beautiful, stunning Jacksonville, Florida. He's a top 100 national recruit; 4-star defensive lineman Jalen Wiggins from Tallahassee. He's visited Florida a number of times; 3-star cornerback Chris McCorkle, teammates with Teddy Foster Florida leads in his recruitment, a very different kind of cornerback than Teddy Foster. Teddy's a more boundary guy, long strider. This is kind of your more Jason Marshall type, solid guy. He's a 3-star right now. I see him going up higher. Unranked wide receiver Javon Boggs from Cocoa, and unranked defensive lineman James Morrow from Buford, Georgia. Florida just offered him. And finally, Zay Mincy, 4-star cornerback from Mainland. It looks to be a UF-Alabama battle. Could visit Alabama on July 29th. I know Florida's really high on him, but it'd be great to swing that one from Alabama. So, Nick gave you a cavalcade of names. Any that you're excited about? What do you think about this barbecue event?
Yeah, it's I think the days of Friday Night Lights are numbered. You're starting to see a lot of these barbecue events. Guys, the recruiting calendar has changed a lot. Everyone, started copying Friday Night Lights to death. And I think guys are done with, having to camp this late in the cycle. So to me, when you're trying to get a big recruiting event, hey, let's have a nice relaxed environment. We don't need to be having guys run and test and cover and lift and do all these kind of things. Let's just have a relaxed environment, get some good food, invite parents, families, and get people here to have conversations with them, talk to them, show them what it would be like to be at the University of Florida without football, because most of what the guys will do is not playing football. So I think that's a good idea. And then when you start looking at the guys who aren't committed, when you have so many guys coming in who are committed, Xavier Filsaime, DJ Lagway, Miles Graham, Darius Hayes, guys like this, then, okay, well, what about Jamari Howard, who's coming in, who isn't committed, a cornerback that you'd like to add to your roster, Wardell Mack, cornerback from Louisiana. To me, it's when you get this many commits on, who are the guys that you're targeting, and how can your commits kind of do your job for you in recruiting?
Yeah, 17 commits on campus. And Nick, we talked about it back in June. Florida had a visit where they had a ton of players come on campus. I think they had 12 official visitors over the next couple of weeks. 8 of them committed to the University of Florida. There's an excitement, there's an energy about being around those players. And, for a guy like Jamari Howard, for, a guy like potentially Zay Mincy, for a Wardell Mack, right? Does that kind of excitement intrigue you to pull the trigger, right? And then you start to look at 2025 guys. Florida, right now sits with 21 commits in this class. We've talked about it on this program. No official number, probably somewhere around 25 to 27. Obviously, you want to fill up as many spots as you can, but you have 25 to 27 in this class. You have 21 right now. You have 17 of those coming for this cookout. But does this start to impact, some of these 2025 guys that are coming on a campus? Now, this isn't an exhaustive list. This is just what we have as of Monday, July 24th. We still have 5 days. You can expect some names. You might even expect a name to fall off of here, but ultimately, I love this. Shannon Snell is going to be cooking out for them. You get the opportunity to build that camaraderie. You get that opportunity for them to build that relationship with each other, because these are their brothers in the trenches, right? So I'm excited about what this event has become. I'm really looking forward to potentially being up in Gainesville this weekend. Got to put some sunscreen on. Got to bring an extra fan. But Gainesville will be popping this weekend. LJ McCray, I know a name that fans have asked. There's a chance that he could go to Georgia this weekend. That wouldn't be great.
Ideal.
Not ideal, but that's kind of where we're at right now. I know there's an offensive lineman, Ori. I don't expect him to make it as well. But again, LJ McCray is not likely expected in Gainesville this weekend. So, again, that's what we have. The University of Florida. Let's see, Michael Fasusi will be in town as well. He just announced on Twitter he's a 5-star athlete out of Louisville, Texas. Pardon me. He announced that he will be actually he's coming for right before the barbecue. So that's my mistake. Gators also lost 4-star linebacker, 2025 guy Elijah Melendez from Kissimmee, Osceola High School. He's going to be going to Arkansas this weekend. So I know at one point he was expected to make it. But fantastic weekend for the Gators, grilling out in the swamp. So, Nick, that takes us to the end of our program today, my friend. It's good hanging out with you. Any final thoughts before we get out of here? And I want you to start thinking about a song of the week.
I have a song of the week ready. No final thoughts from me. Relationship ribs. Might have to put in an order for a relationship ribeye. If we're all going to head out there this week, that would be fun. And the next week, we're going to start breaking down position rooms. So look out for that. We hope to get Silk back next week, unless he becomes a bootlegger up there, making moonshine and running it down to the people.
I can see Silk doing moonshine, some way to get a vegetarian moonshine out there for the fan bases. It's what we've all wanted. But again, we appreciate you guys joining in. Again, if you're listening to us on Apple and you click the link on X, formerly known as Twitter, please go like and subscribe, or subscribe again. Please go rate us there. Please leave us a review. It helps us a ton. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like button. Please hit the subscribe button in the top right-hand corner, or there's a little thing that's orange. It says subscribe. You can just hit there right on our video. We appreciate you guys watching each and every week. We will be back whenever there is breaking news. Other than that, Nick, take us out with the song of the week.
This guy, I'm old, so I didn't see him on TikTok, but I saw him on Reels, which I think is where TikToks go once they've become very popular on the more popular social media app. But Cooper Allen used to do funny songs for TikTok in a country style. He has an unbelievable country music singer voice. This song is with a guy named Spencer Crandall. First time I heard him. It's called Didn't Do by Spencer Crandall and Cooper Allen.
Perfect. Well, Nick, we will see you potentially on Saturday, and if not, same corner, same time next week. Thanks, everybody, for joining in, and we will see you next week.